It can be daunting to have an acre plot that needs irrigation, and you've probably considered many options. From overhead watering that leaves plants soggy and prone to problems, to the nearly impossible task of hand watering an entire acre. Today, I'm going to show you how you can use drip irrigation to effectively and efficiently irrigate your entire acre plot. I'm also going to show you how it's easy enough to install that even a beginner DIYer can do it. Before we order over our 1-acre farm kit, we're going to do a quick design just to make sure there's nothing else we need to include and customize the kit. When you do a design, you can do it on scratch paper, graphing paper, whatever you have handy. Mostly you just want to make sure that what you put on the paper is fairly representative of what you have out in the field. In this way, you can determine if you're going to need elbows to turn your main line 90 degrees or T's to split it in multiple directions. Our head assembly consists of an elbow fitting to turn the assembly towards our field so we can make our line perpendicular to our beds. This is a 2-inch threaded elbow, so make sure you have a compatible connection or adapter. If you don't need to turn 90 degrees, or you have another connection type entirely, such as a male or female outlet, you can use a different part of the head assembly to make your initial connection. For example, the male nipple or even the female ball valve. And then a male nipple so we can connect our female ball valve. A filter that's male on both sides. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the filter is very large, so you might want to account for this depending on how high your water source is up off the ground. Then on the other side, another ball valve. Now it's nice to have a ball valve on both sides of the filter so you can maintenance the filter. If you need to clean the filter, you turn off the upstream ball valve. If you want to flush the filter, you turn off the downstream ball valve, open the flush valve on the filter, and let water flush out. And then another male nipple so we can connect our female ball valve to our female pressure regulator. The pressure regulator maintains downstream pressure. The 1-acre farm kit uses drip tape, which has thin walls, so you want to protect it from high pressure. And the pressure regulator keeps things dripping nice and uniform as it maintains a nice even pressure throughout the entire system. The last piece in the head assembly is the Layflat adapter. That's a male threads adapter that threads into the end of the pressure regulator, and the other end will connect to your Layflat mainline. For the head assembly parts, I'm either going to write a representation, such as the male threads adapter, which is simply a rectangle with male thread lines drawn onto it, or I'll just write out an abbreviation, for example, BV for ball valve, F for filter, LF for Layflat adapter. You can use anything that makes you comfortable and that you can remember. Our main line, I'm going to draw in blue. I'm going to draw fittings in black. For fittings, you'll notice the elbow is just a darkened in 90-degree turn. The T will just be a darkened in T. Again, you can use any method that works well for you. I'm just using what works well for me. So we have 11 beds. Each bed is going to have 3 lines of drip tape. So I will count 3 lines for each bed, skip the spacing between the beds, and then the next 3 tape lines. The reason we're doing this is so at the end we can add up exactly how much drip tape we need. Now I'm going to go back to the main line and draw some of the fittings we're going to need there, such as the Layflat T and the Layflat end plugs. Now, one thing I want to say about end plugs. Some people, instead of putting a plug at the end, like to put in Layflat by male threads and then another female threaded ball valve, just like we have back at the head assembly. The reason being, if you have particularly dirty water or if you're running nutrients through the system, is you're going to need to flush it regularly. It's much easier to flush by simply opening a ball valve than it is to unclamp and then remove the end plug. Now I'm going to draw in the end caps for our drip tape. I know I'll need at least 1 end cap per line of drip tape, so in this case, I'll be drawing in 22 end caps. To draw them in, I'm just going to use a simple square. Now it's time to draw in our Layflat adapters. The Layflat by tape adapters are the part that connects your Layflat main line to your 5/8 drip tape. To use that, I'm just going to use an X to represent them. And just like with the end caps, there'll be 1 for each line of drip tape, thus 22. One important step when you're making your design is to take measurements of the area you're working with. This way you know how much drip tape to get, how much main line to get. Now, if you're planning to use all of the drip tape in the kit at once, your water source will need to have a flow rate in excess of 3,075 gallons per hour. So we've taken our measurements, and now we're going to add them to our sketch. The measurements we got are 200 feet by 160 feet. This means we're going to need 200 feet of main line and 160 feet of drip tape for each line of tape. Now that we have our measurements, we can go ahead and take our tally of everything. The tally is the number of fittings that you need, the total length of main line, and the total length of drip tape that you'll be using. This way you have all the information in one exact place, and you know what customizations to make when you order your kit. The first thing in the tally I'm going to do is the main line fittings. For us, that's just a T and 2 end plugs. Now I'm going to do our drip tape fittings, which for this is just our Layflat to tape adapters, where we connect our tape to our Layflat, and our drip tape end caps. Now to tally up and write down the total length of main line and the total length of tape that we'll need. To determine the total amount of Layflat I'm going to need, I'll do the 10 feet from our head assembly to our T, and then the 200 feet length of that mainline. To determine the total length of tape you need, simply multiply the number of rows by the length of those rows. In our case, that's 160 feet multiplied by 22. That gives us a grand total of 3,520 feet of tape, and we'll put that on our tally list. With everything added and tallied up, we know that the 1 acre farm kit is probably the closest kit matching our system, since it's just a hair under an acre. Now, we know what customizations we can make to make that kit an even better match to our system. For example, the kit doesn't come with a Layflat tee, so we're going to have to add one. It also only comes with one plug. And since our Layflat has 2 open ends, we're going to need 2 plugs and the resulting clamps to secure the Layflat to the fitting. We'll also be able to remove some of the drip tape. Since the kit comes with 3 4,100 foot rolls, we're not going to quite need that much. I also need to count up my clamps to make sure I have enough. I added a T, so I'm going to need 3 more clamps, 1 for each arm of the T, and then 1 more clamp for the end plug that I also added. With the 2 clamps that come with the kit, this gives me a grand total of 6 clamps. Those changes made, the 1 acre farm kit is now almost a perfect match to what we need. All right, now let's go get our parts ordered, get in the field, and install our system. First, I like to organize my parts. To do this, I like to put parts with similar parts, such as my head assembly components over here, my drip tape and mainline Layflat over there, and my drip tape end caps and takeoff adapters over here. Now, you might not know what a lot of these parts are yet, particularly if you're new to drip irrigation, but don't worry, I'm going to cover each and every part and what purpose it serves in our system. First up is our drip tape. This is the part that actually delivers water to the plants. Just below it is our mainline Layflat, about 328 feet of it. Then we've got our punch. This punches the holes in the crease of the Layflat for our teardrop fittings, which we have here. I'll show you why they call them a teardrop later on in the video. It's the part that you actually push into the wall of the Layflat where you punch the hole. Then our hex head wrench. This goes with the teardrop fittings and is what is used to get enough leverage to install them into the wall of the Layflat. Here we have our drip tape end caps, so we can close off all the ends of our drip tape runs. Then comes a Layflat tee. Not every system is going to need that, and it's not in the kit by default, but we're going to need it here today because we're going to have to split our Layflat mainline to get it to cover both sides of our field. Then a pair of scissors. Believe it or not, this is all that's needed to cut through a roll of Layflat. Then our threads by Layflat adapter. This is the part that connects our Layflat to our head assembly parts, which are over here. The head assembly consists of a filter to protect our system from debris and potential clogs, a couple ball valves so we can do maintenance on either side of the filter, upstream or downstream, or if we need to flush it. Then our pressure regulator. This maintains downstream pressure and keeps everything dripping uniform and evenly. And it also protects the system from potentially high water pressures. Then we have nipples so we can connect our female pieces such as the ball valve and the elbow in case we need to turn our head assembly. And we have our clamps, which are required to secure Layflat to Layflat fittings. And then finally, our end plugs. These are what we use to put in both sides of our Layflat so we can close it off and it can be pressurized. Now we're going to go install our head assembly. The head assembly are the parts that go directly on the water source. Our water source is a 2-inch male pipe threaded connection. If you have a different water source, it might just take an adapter or so to use the same head assembly parts. We're going to start by taking the elbow because we need to turn 90 degrees to get towards our field, a male nipple so we can connect our female ball valve to our female threaded elbow. If you need a hand finding the right adapter or reducer to get the kit connected to your water source, just reach out in the comments below or at dripdepot.com and let us know the thread type and size of your water source, and we'll be happy to help you identify the correct adapter or reducer. Okay, we got our elbow on so we can turn this whole assembly 90 degrees to get it pointed towards the field. Now we'll put on our nipple so we can connect our female ball valve. And now our ball valve that goes upstream of the filter. This works as a shutoff. If we need to maintenance our filter or remove it or change the element inside, we use this ball valve to shut the water off if we need to. Next up is our filter. Because our water source has quite dirty water, we went with one of the pretty large filters that comes in the kit. To get the filter onto the vertical assembly, we're going to separate the 2 halves of the filter. Taking the cap off the base of the filter is also how you change the element or pull it out for cleaning. Because we need a lot of clearance, we're turning our assembly up because it is a pretty large filter, as you can see. I'll find the inlet side of my filter, marked by this arrow, and thread it into the ball valve. I'll get it threaded all the way in and then push it to the ground and orient it vertically. This way, I can put the element back on and then reattach the top of the filter. When you're reassembling the filter, it's important that the steel clamp is correctly in between the two halves of the filter. You want to make sure that the lip of the clamp grips the lip of this half, while at the same time connecting to this half. Now, if you get it wrong, you'll probably know because either the clamp won't close all the way, or this part of the filter will still be easily removed. All right, now we're going to put on our downstream ball valve. This one is good to close when you want to flush the filter. You leave that one open, this one closed, open up the flush cap on the filter, and water will come out of the filter and thus flushing your filter, taking some of the debris that might be clogging up the screen or discs with it. Now we're going to install our male nipple, and that's so we can connect the female side of our pressure regulator. And now for our pressure regulator. We're going to connect the female inlet on the regulator to the male nipple. Now, on the regulator, you'll see an arrow that indicates the direction of flow. You make sure you want to respect this direction of flow on the regulator. And now for the last piece of the head assembly, our threads by Layflat adapter. We'll put the threaded end into our regulator, and then we're ready to connect our mainline Layflat to the barbed end. And there we go, an entire head assembly for a full acre drip irrigation system. You don't have to be a professional to understand or install. All right, now let's roll out our Layflat and get it connected to the water source. Once we get down there, I'm going to use a simple pair of scissors to cut into the Layflat so that we can install some fittings. When you cut your Layflat, try to make sure the line is as perfectly straight as you can make it. This will help when it comes time to put it on the fitting and help you create a secure, leak-free connection. We're ready to connect our Layflat to our water source. To do so, all we're going to need is a clamp, a 10mm socket wrench, our Layflat, and the barbed adapter we have connected. To start, slide your clamp on over the end of your Layflat. The clamp has to go on first. When you go to put the clamps on over the Layflat, turn the screw to unthread the clamp, thus opening it more. This will allow it to have a big enough diameter to go on over the outside of the Layflat. Then, slide the Layflat on over the barb of the adapter. This is also a good time to check to make sure you cut your Layflat nice and straight. A straight cut is less likely to leak. Once the clamp is on, you can tighten it up with this 10mm socket wrench. Now, be sure not to over tighten it, as you can crack or damage the fitting beneath. One thing to keep in mind, if you experience any leaking with one clamp, is do use a second clamp. If you're using T-bolt clamps, the trick is to have the bolt on one side on the first clamp, on the opposite side on the second clamp. This helps even out the tension and pressure. When putting on and tightening the clamp, make sure there's no folds or overlaps in the Layflat beneath, as this can result in leaking. All right, now we're ready to run our Layflat from the top row all the way down to the bottom row, where we can build our manifold or header row. All right, we've got our Layflat ran down from the first row to the last row. Now we're ready to cut the Layflat and begin installing fittings. Now, I'm going to make the cut in the Layflat a little bit past this last bed. The reason being, we're going to want to flush our Layflat before we use it and during its use as an irrigation line to make sure we get any debris out. And I don't want that flushed water to go into the bed. So I'm going to cut it a little bit beyond the bed. Now we've got all of our Layflat ran. Now we need to connect the Layflat that runs from the water source to the Layflat that makes up our drip manifold. To do so, I'm simply going to cut into both Layflats and install a T-fitting. Just like the other fittings, I'll put the clamp on over the Layflat first, then I'll push it on over the barb and tighten the clamp. With all of our Layflat ran, it's time to cap off the ends. To do so, we're simply going to use this barbed insert plug. Just like with the other fittings, we'll slide our clamp on over the Layflat. We'll insert the insert end into our Layflat until it's completely covered, and then we'll clamp it in place. Then our Layflat will be ready to be pressurized. We left one end uncapped down there at the low end at the very last bed. The reason we did that is so we could perform a system flush. The system flush gets any debris that got in during installation, and some almost always does, flushed right out the end. To perform a system flush, simply turn on the water source and give the water enough time to run from the water source to the top where we have it capped, and then out the end at the bottom, and then let it run for a few moments longer. The water has to have enough time to travel the entire system and dislodge any and all debris to flush it right out the end. Okay, let's turn on our water. Now, give the Layflat some time to fill up with water. Okay, now that we've completed our mainline installation, we're ready to connect our irrigation system to it. We'll be connecting some drip tape using teardrop fittings. If you're new to Layflat, you may be wondering what a teardrop fitting is. A teardrop fitting, as its name implies, is a fitting with a teardrop shape at the end. Now this teardrop shape is what allows it to be connected into the wall of Layflat without leaking. This is how people make drip manifolds or run laterals off of a Layflat main. This teardrop valve fitting is a connect drip tape, what some people know as a emitter line, and use your Layflat as a drip manifold. And it even comes with a handy on-off valve. Teardrop to drip tape fittings come with or without the valve. Teardrop fittings were also available as a plug. Essentially, the plug threads onto this threaded connection. This means if you make a bad cut with your Layflat cutter that you don't need, or need to pull something out that you no longer need, you can plug it up without having to waste that whole section of Layflat, or without having to cut it out and repair it with a coupler. An important thing to account for when using Layflat and teardrop fittings is that the cutters are available in different sizes. It really depends on the size of the hole for the size of the teardrop fitting. To determine what size cutter you need, check the specifications for the teardrop fitting that you'll be using. It should state which size cutter it requires. Just like there's different size cutters for different size teardrops, there's different size hex wrenches for different size fittings. Now, in general, larger diameter tubing or tape is going to use the larger hex wrench. But that's not always true. So be sure to check the specifications for the fitting you're using to see which hex wrench is the best to use with it. Today, we're using the 10mm T-handled hex installation tool. First, we'll unthread the valve from the rest of the fitting. That way we just have mostly just our teardrop to work with. Then we're going to insert this into the teardrop into the hole. Now we've partially filled the line with water to make it easier for the hole to separate so that we can get this tip of the teardrop fitting started. We're also doing it under direct sunshine. Now, the hotter the Layflat is, the easier it is to get the very last part of the teardrop in. This means partially charged with water to make it easier to get started during the hottest part of the day under direct sunlight to get it finished. One last little step is to slightly unthread the teardrop because you want the wall of the Layflat to rest between these two. Then you simply make a cut in the Layflat with your Layflat cutter. We're using the 14mm cutter. Now it has to be along the crease in the Layflat. Then use a T-handled hex tool to install your teardrop fitting. Now, you'll push the tip of the teardrop into the hole you cut, followed by a twist and push motion. One tip I've found that makes it much easier is to also push on the teardrop with your thumb. Remember, the warmer the hose is, the easier this will be. After it's in, you'll just thread the fitting back together and you're done. If you're working on cool hose, this will take quite a bit of elbow grease. Remember, twist and push down into the hose simultaneously. The first few may be really difficult, but it's one of those things that after you've done some, it even becomes simple. Now, keep in mind to do it on the hot part of the day. It's much easier when it's warmer. I can't say that enough. All right, we've got all our takeoff adapters installed. Now it's time to run the actual drip tape all the way down our rows. Our rows are approximately 160 feet in length, so it's going to be quite the roll of drip tape. Since the rows are particularly long, we're going to use some equipment to help us unroll it. It's simply going to be an A-frame with a rod, and we're going to put the rod through the core of the drip tape so that we can just pull the drip tape and unroll it down the row. For the larger farm kits, while it is possible to run the tape down the rows by yourself, we do recommend getting assistance here if you know anyone who can give you a hand. The large rolls come at about 4,100 feet, and that's a lot of tape to run by yourself. There's lots of ways you can do it. We've seen people roll the roll of drip tape itself. We've seen people where one person holds it and the other person unrolls the drip tape and takes it down to the end of the row. The possibilities are pretty much endless, but we do find it's easier to use a little bit of equipment when the rows get this long and the roll gets this large. It doesn't have to be an expensive piece of equipment. Even a couple pieces of stacked cinder block with rebar can serve well enough to unroll your drip tape. Okay, now that we got some of our tape run, let's connect it to our takeoff adapter. All right, I'll show you how. Simply slide the tape on over the barb and turn the locking nut to secure it in place. When installing your drip tape, make sure that the emitters in the drip tape are facing up. You can tell where the emitters are at because you can physically see them in the hole, or you can tell by the two white stripes. That end should always face up. And when you're cutting into your tape for any reason, whether it's at the start or the end of your tape run, be careful not to cut into that emitter. You'll be able to see it with its physical presence and the hole where it drips out of. With all of our tape lines ran, it's time to put on our end caps. The end caps go on just like the other fittings we've been working with today. Make sure the locking nut is fully retracted, slide the tape on over the barb, turn the locking nut to secure it in place. These end caps, just like the end caps we used on our mainline tubing, are also threaded so that you can easily flush your system. It's a good idea to flush your tape system regularly to get any debris that might get inside flushed out the end. The turbulent action inside the tape will dislodge debris and see it flushed right out the back. With our tape lines capped, I'm going to go ahead and stake them in place. Now when I do this, it's best to make sure that the stake just goes over the fitting, not over the tape. When the tape pressurizes and fills, you don't want to push against the stake and potentially rupture. That's why we put it over the fitting. The reason we use the stake is to hold our tape in place. Through repeated watering cycles and thermal expansion and contraction cycles, it can get displaced and move out of place. Stakes will help hold it in place for longer. Eventually, it will still get displaced. You'll want to monitor your lines, make adjustments, and keep them in place, but the stakes will help prevent major displacement. While you're putting on your threaded end caps, it's a good idea to check the threading at the end of each one as you apply it. Sometimes during transportation, they get jostled loose, and better to find out now than when you do your first watering cycle and see water come leaking out the end of it. So while you're putting in your end caps, give each one a little tighten, a little test, and make sure it's secure. During the first watering cycle is the perfect time to walk the system to check for any problems. Check where your drip tape and takeoff adapters connect to your main line and make sure they're not leaking. Check your end caps. Check joints, connections, and fittings, and check the parts at the head assembly and make sure all of them are operating leak-free. Then walk your drip tape lines and make sure they're dripping as they should be from the start all the way to the finish. There are some things you can do to avoid making mistakes with your system, or even to enhance it further. Check out our Drip Irrigation for Farms playlist right here. There you'll find specific mistakes to avoid, how to inject nutrients into your system, or how to automate the entire system. If you'd like to just jump in and get started right away, you can find our 1 acre farm kit right here. Now, our kits are fully customizable, so if the 1 acre farm kit isn't perfect the way it is, a few small changes can make it accommodate almost any layout.